Times Radio's Ollie Cole has been reporting from Huntington this weekend and joins us now. Ollie, morning to you.
Good morning.
Attention has turned really to this LNER staff member who's being widely called a hero.
Yeah, and he's still the only person, as far as we know, who's still in hospital at Addenbrooke's fighting for his life. What's remarkable about what happened on Saturday night is that it all happened in about 12 minutes. You know, the train departed Peterborough around 7:30, where the man who's currently being held in custody is believed to have got on. And by the time 7:42 rolled around and police were called to meet the train at Huntington, absolute carnage had ensued on that train. And there were lots of stories of bravery and heroism along the way as passengers sort of raced to the end of the train to try and get away from this man who seemed to be indiscriminately stabbing people as he made his way up the carriages of the train. Some hid in toilets, some hid in the buffet car. But this particular member of staff, having reviewed the CCTV, police are saying that nothing short of heroism is a way to describe what he did. He put himself in harm's way to protect other people, and fellow passengers sort of grabbed things and started throwing them at the attacker. But this person, it seems, went above and beyond to try and protect those people on that train. And this morning, he remains in Addenbrooke's hospital in Cambridge as the only person still in a life-threatening condition after the attack.
What more do we know about the suspect and what he's supposed to have said on the train?
Well, look, we know he is now the only suspect. So yesterday, British Transport Police said that they'd arrested a 32-year-old black British male and a 35-year-old British man of Caribbean descent. That 35-year-old, it turns out, was a sort of case of mistaken identity. Police say that, it was reported in good faith that he was involved, but actually he wasn't. So after a day of questioning, he's been let go with no further action. The 32-year-old remains in custody for questioning. Now, we know that he left the train at Huntingdon like the rest of the passengers who ran out. We know that there he was met by several armed officers from Cambridgeshire Constabulary. While on the train, there were reports this morning that one eyewitness, someone called Dana Arnold, who saw the attacker, said that while on the train she said, "Please, please don't." And then she says something changed in his eyes and said the devil's not going to win. So we're going to get these sort of dribs and drabs of reports of what's coming out of this attack. And then when he got to the station and headed across the train station car park, he was wielding a knife, and police confronted him. And just before being hit with a taser, he is supposed to have said, "Kill me, kill me, kill me." That's what one taxi driver in the area yesterday was telling journalists that he heard the perpetrator say before being hit with a taser, and arrested. That knife was then recovered from the scene. So, of course, all day yesterday and into today, police will be questioning him to try and piece together what they can of any motive. Yesterday it was sort of remarkable in Huntington, where the train remained sat at platform 2 of the station, so almost frozen in time, really, where you could see half-empty coffee cups, bottles of water still sat on the tables, as forensics officers made their way up and down that train, trying to take in a scene of carnage and trying to review as much CCTV, pick up as much evidence as they can, as they now start to sort of piece together what happened in those 12 minutes.
And also that those 12 minutes are important, but the questions will be asked that did this alleged attacker come to the notice of anyone in the system at any point in the preceding days, months and years?
Yeah, exactly. Now, the Times this morning understands that there was no suggestion that this person was known to PREVENT, which is the counter-terrorism scheme, all the security services. There's obviously some reporting and speculation this morning about the mental health condition of this person and sort of what drove this person to join the train at Peterborough and carry out this attack. I think it's fair to say that to most sort of normal-minded people, anyone who would be able to carry out an attack such as this was not necessarily of the right mind. Yeah. But we know that putting this together is going to be a really, really difficult thing. There was a suggestion early on when counter-terror police were involved, that, this may have been a sort of far more premeditated thing. However, it turns out the counter-terror police were involved purely because they're very good at dealing with large-scale attacks such as this. So it's not being treated as terrorism. Now we've only got one suspect rather than two, so it really is now down to how police question him throughout today and what they can sort of gather from him in terms of what he tells them in terms of what was going through his head when he boarded that train in Peterborough.
Just finally, Ollie, you know politics really well. There's two versions of events here, aren't there, as I said at the beginning of this programme. One, this is an extraordinary example of a system working, because the cops came quickly, the emergency services came quickly, the train driver knew where to go, went to Huntington Station, they tasered this guy, they disarmed him, all of that within a period of 14 minutes. That's one version of events, the British system responding to an extraordinary event successfully. But you'll also know that people will be using this to make the argument Britain isn't safe, we're more vulnerable than ever, we can't get on trains anymore without being worried for our lives, all an example of lawless Britain. Where does the narrative go? Will different people be pushing different narratives?
It depends who you speak to. I mean, if you listened yesterday to the Huntingdon MP, Ben Obsi-Jekti, who's a Conservative MP and a new MP, he was saying how the services have been sort of training for an incident such as this not long before it happened, and that training obviously paid dividends, because we know that yesterday 5 people who were brought to hospital after that attack were discharged. One only remains in a life-threatening condition. Now, of course, we hope he pulls through, but to sort of have this enclosed space and this attack take place, and there to currently be no fatalities, is in a way quite remarkable. I think once we, after we heard the sort of details emerging, first of all on Saturday night, but you only have to look, however, at the first sort of hour of social media after the attack, on Saturday, where all sorts of narratives were being pushed. We know that there's a big push now for the police to be more transparent than ever. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is very, very clear to officers about that once they've got information that they can put out, obviously they don't want to jeopardise the case in any way, but once they've got, we saw after the Southport attack, and we saw after the incident in Liverpool during the sort of celebratory parade there, police were very keen to sort of put on record what they knew about this person. However, yesterday I was reporting from Huntingdon and putting bits of information out, and it wasn't soon after saying that this was a 32-year-old black British national born in the UK who had been arrested, that the sort of goalpost changed almost, and there were questions over, okay, well, who were this person's parents, or who were, so people have this narrative that they want to push. I think on the whole, the managing director of LNER has consistently said how incredibly well his team worked. That station, that driver of the train managed to pull into the station as soon as possible, and we saw the dozens of emergency services descend on that train and make an arrest within about 8 minutes of being called. That person was arrested, which is remarkable, really. But it is true that despite, and Fraser Nelson from the Times, who consistently looks at the actual data and stats on this, knows better than anyone else, that however much you talk about the stats, there is a sense of mood here. And as sort of, particularly as the dark nights draw in, as stories appear on the front pages of stabbings and dangerous attacks, people do feel less safe. And what government and politicians will have to be careful of is sort of mission creep in this respect, is that the sort of feeling of being unsafe doesn't overtake reality, and they can still grip that narrative and make sure they're doing enough proactively to stop that narrative running away with bad actors.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Ollie, great to speak to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
That's Ollie Cole there, at Times Radio's correspondent, who's been reporting from Huntington.